Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we are going to be going over some of the short block stuff, oil cooler, freeze plugs, probably dip into the oil pan pickup tube, might get into the adapter plate, stuff of that nature. We are getting pretty close to where we have to pull this engine out because we need like the air conditioner adapter, all the alternator bracketry, but either way, let's go ahead and get started. We did get the engine painted. It is this as the primer, 2 coats, and then this 3 coats. And then once we get all of this put back together, we'll go ahead and clear coat it as a full assembly. For the oil pan, we brought back the OG 05's oil pan. Does have some nice dings in it, but it does actually hold oil, so we're going to go ahead and just reuse this guy since it's powder coated and clean and ready to go, and it's already stamped for our 14 mil main studs back there. So without further ado, what we're going to do is get the brake clean and paper towel out, clean that surface, lay out our gasket with some RTV again, get the oil pan on there, and also the pickup tube. Now, when you run a regular common rail, there's a block stiffener here that has the block stiffener basically sticks up about 300 thousandths of an inch. As you guys can see here, we don't have that anymore. It is gone. So what we have to do is make some dowels. All right, so we got our 2 bolts. Had to find a couple gaskets on this that I actually do not put any RTV on. Is the oil pickup tube gasket. You probably could. I just get a little worried with it potentially making its way into the engine, which I know is kind of a weird fear, but here we are. So go ahead, and this is a genuine Cummins pickup tube, but it has been modified. This is the one Meyer and I modified. Allow us to run triple turbos. Okay, so we got these. And I will torque these before I slide the spacers in and torque that. That's why you shouldn't set stuff on an engine. So we got those torqued in there. Now that we got that taken care of, we have our dowels here. Basically, you're gonna slip those in like so. And then we're gonna grab our fasteners. So, okay, so now we got our oil pickup tube on. And we wanna make sure it's nice and flush with the gasket, which it is. Now we can move on to the oil pan. Just going to spray a little brake clean on a rag. Basically, you just want to make sure the mating surface is not covered in WD-40, like so. So I'll go ahead and lay our bead of RTV and then put our gasket on here. So we have both of our freeze plugs knocked out. We have all of our rods torqued, our cams in, tappets, J-jets. You just kind of do a once over, got the rear main, front cover. So I think we're ready to go. I already laid out the oil pan gasket so we know which way is which. And that junction right there and this junction right here get a little extra. So go ahead and finish her up. Like so. Oil pan gasket from McBee is pretty easy. The thin part here goes towards the back, and the little O-ring printed thing goes down. And basically you want to lay the gasket kind of evenly as you go. Now where they fold them in half is a real pain in the butt because they like to pull up right there, as you guys can see. push it down, but it comes right back up. I even laid this one out for a little bit to kind of speed up the process, but clearly it did not work out for us very well. And then I put RTV on this gasket here. This one I just go right over the bolt holes. We're ready to stab this oil pan off. This oil pan does have a little something funky, so let me go put this fitting in for the third turbo. Okay, so we got our third one in here. Oil pan's clean, so we'll drop this down. Like so. Very anticlimactic, I feel like. All right, so now we're just gonna put all the bolts in. Now we'll go ahead, let the RTV set up for a few minutes, and then we'll torque this bad Larry down. All right, now that the RTV's had a chance to set up, about 20 minutes, 30 minutes, we're gonna go ahead and torque these all to 18 foot-pounds. Got our oil pan all done up here. Don't worry guys, we'll make this shine like a diamond here in a second. We'll get some slick mist on here, because she is powder coated. We gotta kind of show her off a little bit. Hold on. This oil pan's had a rough life. Very rough life. I think I've blown up 2 engines with this oil pan actually. So we'll bring her back to her former glory here. Now we can go ahead, let's flip this puppy over, because we are done on the bottom end. From here on out, we are dealing with the top side of this engine here. So now we can go ahead, put the side freeze plugs, oil cooler in, front freeze plug, slowly start buttoning her up. All right, so now we're gonna install the oil cooler. Not a bad idea to just wipe off the mating surface a little bit with some brake cleaner. Just make sure you get a good seal with that oil cooler gasket. Like I said before, we're using the Interstate McBee set, so the one with the big hole. And what I like about the McBee ones, the whole thing is a giant O-ring. And then here's one of the differences between a 6.7, 5.9. 6.7 has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8 cores here, and a 5.9 only has 7. So when you're doing these conversions, it's always a good idea if you could put a bigger oil cooler in, go for it. And then what I do is drop a bunch of bolts, but what I do is I get 2 bolts started through the oil filter housing, and then I start it through the gasket, then through the oil cooler, and then I grab the back gasket, and then I go ahead to get these started. And you don't want to do them all the way tight, just kind of snug them up. Now we got our oil cooler on. I'll go ahead and put a brand new oil filter, but I won't fill it. I'll put that on here just to keep all the debris from getting inside the engine. The other thing we did off camera is just put our PDD block drains in, beat those in pretty easy. And then we installed all these freeze plugs that have been knocked out. Green Loctite, hammer, and find a socket that'll allow you to pound them in past flush, and you are good to go. All right, next up, we are going to install our billet side freeze plugs. They go right here, pretty easy. Bolt, O-ring goes through the freeze plug here. There's an O-ring on that, and then this bar goes on the back. I always lubricate this O-ring with some engine oil so it slides in here nice and get them torqued down. Okay, so we got the tape off. The only other thing I did was just put the water passage here, which comes with a fleece coolant bypass kit. And then we got our PDD block off plate. And then we put our firings in our groove here. And now we got to get the dowels. This is what aligns the head and the head gasket to the block. They come in these McBee, what you call these, the freeze plug kits. There we go, freeze plug kit. So you just put these in here, pretty simple. They just go like that, and then you pound them in. And we'll go ahead again. This is a Hazley firing gasket, pretty easy to do. Really go one way. You get the alignment dowel started like so, and you guys can see all of our firings are staying in the groove here. And basically you want to make sure that this oil galley is unblocked, the push rod holes, and then all the cooling passages have an opening here. So we'll go ahead and get the headset on. All right, and now that the head is on, we can go ahead, start getting our 625s put in. That'll be the same procedure as before, just engine oil on the bottom threads, ARP lube on the stud part, the underside of the nut, and both sides of the washer. We'll go ahead and get that done. Okay, so you guys saw we got all the head studs, washers all started, and then I back them off about a quarter turn. Then I'm gonna go ahead and run all these down with an impact just to take up the slack on the threads, and then we'll start the torque sequence: 50, 100, 150, and then this head is installed. All right, our beautiful 625s are in. Man, they just look so nice. I love fresh studs. Also, one thing to mention, guys, when you're doing firings, it's normal for this gasket not to be fully compressed until you torque it, because the head's actually sitting on the rings. Just obviously when you torque the head, it crushes it. So now we're ready to get this taped off and ready for some paint. We're gonna go gloss black for the head and kind of touch up a little bit there. But yeah, she is on. So we left off, this video is obviously taking place a couple of days later. We left off putting the head on here. So now what we're gonna do is take some of the parts off of this engine that we need for this. So we still have the AC bracket, a couple of the cylinder head bracketry, harness, stuff like that. So we're gonna go ahead, get to putting our engine mounts on, our adapter plate, you know, things of that nature. We did go ahead, got some stuff painted. We did go ahead and get some new stock engine mounts from O'Reilly's. They're like 45 bucks. The old ones were pretty much smoked, so we got fresh of those. A new belt tensioner, new idler pulley, a new, where are we at here? New Gates belt, just miscellaneous things. We're gonna do a new thermostat as well, which I've totally spaced on. New water pump. Just want to go back together. This is a fresh engine. We're gonna refresh those things. So we're gonna go ahead, get to work on that. So one of the core parts I need out of this engine is the CP3 gear. This is a little bit easier to see than we had done before. So obviously I need the nut, the washer, and then basically that access hole, the plastic cap, is what blocks this. And then you guys can see how it's threaded here. We'll put our little puller tool on like so. I prefer this tool over some other tools because they don't all fit everything. This tool fits all the injection systems, which I feel like is a very nice value. The good news, I guess while I'm rambling on here, is Power Driven's changing their tool to actually fit all the injection pump systems. So I'm really excited about that. It's always nice to be able to buy stuff from the people I work for. So we'll go ahead and get this popped off. A little easier out of the truck. And then, boom, CP3 gear comes off. We'll get that cleaned up and pull this 12 mil out so we can sell it. We're going with the Exergy 14, which is right behind that DDP box for this engine. Single pump, that way we have less weight, less moving parts. Some things happened here. We got it all torn down, all the core parts, everything else is Myers. It's kind of a mess, but it's organized, I swear. Now we'll go ahead, start getting all these parts cleaned up in the parts cleaner so we can finish putting that together. All right, so we got the truck cleaned out. This will be our last measurement. We have to put the push rods in, valve bridges, and basically what we're gonna do is measure piston to valve clearance on this setup here. Should be pretty straightforward, easy to do. I'll go ahead and get it set up. Just 2 push rods, 2 rocker arm assembly, 2 bridges. Due to measuring the head valve depth, so that would be the amount the valves recess in the head, and protrusion, how much the piston came out. We'll go ahead and check this on cylinder 1. That was actually, ironically, our highest protrusion. All the valve depths were the same. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and set up for valve lash. We got our dial indicator, our 10 and 20 set already. And what we wanna do is spin this engine 180, or I guess the cam 180, so the engine 360 degrees. Basically the other mark should be over here. That way we're in where the valves are actuated, and then we can measure our piston to valve clearance. So look down here, kind of at the gear. Okay, so there we are. We have our dial indicator zeroed, or we're going to zero it like so. Make sure you have enough adjustment on your dial indicator there. Grab our little adjustment tool. spin this off, and then we're gonna push the valve down. So we have our push rod tight. We're gonna zero this puppy out here, and we're gonna go until it can't go down anymore. So about 100 thousandths. And then we're gonna spin the engine 7 degrees forwards, 7 degrees backwards, and check that same measurement. So we have our indicator here. We'll zero this out a little bit. There we go. Read 0 on the pointer. So we're gonna go ahead and move the engine. It's about 7 right there. We're gonna go ahead, re-zero this out because obviously the cam's moving the valve around. Okay, so we got plenty on the downward side here. We're back at 0. And then we're gonna spin it the other way. Okay, check the intake here. So we got about 100 thousandths that way. Zero that back out like so. Now we'll go ahead and do the same thing on the exhaust. All right, guys, so we have all of our measurements done. This was the last thing. The intake ended up being like 69 thousandths. So 62 on the exhaust, 69 on the intake. Keep in mind the firing gasket will crush a little bit more. You have 37 thousandths cut into each groove out of 105, plus the thickness of the head gasket, which is 52. So when this is all said and done, we should have around 58 thousandths of piston and valve clearance. 45 is the min, 55 is what I like, so we hit it. So let's go ahead and go over all of our measurements here. Just so if you guys were following along this whole time, you know where we're at. So we'll start at the bottom. Our piston to wall clearance is 7.5 to 8 thousandths piston to wall. Our mains were 3.6 thousandths. Our rods were 3.4 thousandths. Our wrist pins were about 1.5 thou. And that was on the small end of the rod and also in the piston itself. One thing I forgot to cover is the side to side of the rod. 15 thousandths is kind of what we shoot for. I've never had an issue with the wagglers. The only time I've ever ran into a rod being a little too thick was on a set of HD Carrillos. We just kind of had to mill those down a little bit. It kind of sucked, but it is what it is. Just jam a feeler gauge, jam the rod all the way up against the rod journal, stick a feeler gauge in there, and then that is your measurement. For crank thrust, we had 8 thousandths. For cam thrust, we had 3 thousandths. For our piston protrusion, we had anywhere from 21 to 23 thousandths. Our valve depths were right around 60 thousandths, give or take a couple thousandths either way. Our cam bore clearance was 2 thousandths. What else we got here? We got our piston, our valve to piston clearance, 62 on the exhaust, 69 on the intake. And then our ring gaps were 28 thousandths top ring, 47 thousandths second ring, and 18 thousandths on the oil ring. So this is essentially, we're not done, but this is the last of the nitty gritty kind of boring stuff. At first, when I saw the lack of engagement with these engine videos, I was a little bit like, not butthurt, but I was like, man, I spent a lot of time on these. I thought that they would do better, but hopefully as this channel grows, people go back to these and they see the steps required to build an engine from the ground up, how to measure, what kind of tools you need to assemble one of these. Again, guys, it's not a lot that needs to, you don't have to be rich to build engines.
as you progress and you start to do it for a living. I know one thing I'm looking in the future is a digital nitty or yo-yo, whatever, dial bore gauge. That is one of those upgrades. But all in all, that's it. After this, we just got to bolt on a bunch of accessories. And I'm going to wrap that up in another video. We'll put basically get it ready to install. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this series. And it becomes a reference for you guys to look back. If you missed anything, I think there's 4 or 5 of these videos, maybe 6 with the cleaning in total. Go back, rewatch them, ask questions. I'm always on Instagram, just a common rail 24V, and I'm more than happy to help you out there. I get about 30 to 40 messages a day, so if I don't get back to you right away, it's not that I'm ignoring you. I do have a real life too. Hopefully you enjoyed this. Give it a big thumbs up. Drop a comment down below. Make sure you subscribe because we're going to have first fire on this pig pretty soon. And as always, guys, I will catch you on the next one.